I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I'm Professor Chad Johnson. I teach the cybersecurity curriculum here at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. I have developed, in conjunction with fellow faculty members, the entirety of our undergraduates and our graduate cybersecurity programs. Our undergraduate program here at UWSP and our graduate program made available through the UW Extended Campuses Collaborative Degree Program. And before that, of course, I was in industry. I was a cybersecurity professional. And at some point along the way, both before, during, and after, I was also a cybersecurity learner. And what I'm here to talk to you about today are some of the things that I have found important in terms of having a modality for teaching cybersecurity, both as a learner, as a professional, and as a cybersecurity educator. So I became a cybersecurity educator because while I was in industry, I discovered a terrible truth, a truth which I assume at this point you're all equally familiar, and that is the desperate need for more and better cybersecurity education. I found this to be a clear imperative for the immediate short-term and long-term progress of our industry, and likely in some respects, civilization in general. But within that seed of need, that necessity, there is a requirement for invention, because we cannot simply learn cybersecurity skills theoretically. At some point, we must put them into practice. And I found two main issues as I was learning and developing my knowledge in cybersecurity. First is, of course, where to find quality information. That's difficult when there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation out there. And secondly, where to practice these skills, to actually see what's happening, to have hands-on experience in a way that was ethical, legal, and safe. This is compounded, more complicated, by the fact that cybersecurity is an ever-evolving field. It's constantly changing. There's always something new. And that means that the solution that we have to these two central challenges must be versatile. It must change with the times. We must be able to grow and shrink it as required. And this is even more difficult as an educator when we live in a time of ever-shrinking budgets, changing priorities, and don't forget the all-too-common overpromise and undeliver marketing style of many products in the space. Now, what I did learn throughout my career is the importance of this hands-on experience. For myself as a learner, going from theoretical to practical and having a place to do that caused my own understanding to grow by leaps and bounds. I understand that this is not an approach that necessarily works for all students, but I think that it plays to enough learning styles that certainly it would warrant some exploration. This is the same exact principles that cause us in high school and university education to fund things like chemistry labs or physics labs, or even our arts programs that actually, require specialty applications, software, hardware, kilns, what have you, in order to actually give students the opportunity to do the things that they're learning about. So I consider it to be an absolutely critical step in the learning process. The biggest issue for me is the bridge between conceptual and practical. We can talk about security all day long. The true understanding of security, the internalization, comes from the application of that knowledge. In addition to that, there is an emphasis, of course, in education in general, but especially within the field of cybersecurity, to enhance critical thinking. We can't simply teach kids these principles, expect them to, just by rote memorization, be able to recall this and then apply it to their real-world careers or real-world situations, because they never had that leap from idea to practice. And so they never learn the critical thinking and problem solving that is absolutely essential for so many aspects of the field of cybersecurity. Now, the issue, of course, is that we have a bit of a problem, as I mentioned before, is that learning these skills, regardless of whether or not you're learning blue team or red team or even just simple professional principles or what have you, is that learning this, teaching this, indeed, can be a little bit complicated and can potentially endanger technical infrastructure. It is very easy to accidentally breach some kind of ethical or legal boundary. So what we need for all cybersecurity learners, essentially, at some point or another, is a risk-free environment, somewhere where we can experiment in real-world scenarios without the real-world consequences. Now, for many cybersecurity learners, what that eventually ends up meaning is that they will develop their own lab, their own virtual machines and their own scenarios. They might make use of prepackaged scenarios, but it's all a self-learning, self-building process. Or the aforementioned over-promising, under-delivering marketing comes forward, and the learner is sort of forced or feels forced one way or another to pay for these services that end up not doing them much good in the end anyway. Now, let's get to the reason why we are here today, because I teach at a university level, and for my students, I do, or I can, expect a certain amount of maturity from my learners. I will decline to quantify exactly how much maturity I expect, but let's say a certain amount. But this is more complicated with your learners, because we're talking about younger learners here in the 9th to 12th grade realm, where we may be teaching those students principles as simple as cyber hygiene, perhaps going all the way up to and including professional principles in an industry that's ever evolving. So while I, in my undergraduate classes, can expect students to do everything within their power, of course mistakes will happen, to be safe and wise in their application of these principles, I don't think that it's necessarily at all, not that we can't expect maturity out of children. I think that it is probably a mistake in some ways to bank on it, right? Children are impulsive and curious, as children should be. And we have to remember that cybersecurity principles are also cybercrime principles. And so before we arm children with this knowledge, we have to temper our expectations for performance and malfeasance in equal measure, just as we do for the sciences and arts now. We need a controlled, safe environment, isolated, in order to teach these skills. A playground, essentially, where we can monitor, met, and measure. Something that we control. And there are solutions out there in the works. There's, for example, in terms of your curriculum, CSTA has extended some initiatives. The National K-12 Cybersecurity Education Roadmap by NICE, Community Coordinating Council. Cyber.org has some information on that. But none of those are really a playground, at least not the specific things I'm talking about at this moment. So at one point, early on in my teaching career, I sat down and I considered all of the challenges of teaching cybersecurity in order to try and work out a way to overcome them. This is what I came up with. So the challenges associated with teaching, well, really any STEM field, but in my case, particularly cybersecurity, came down to the following. Like, for example, cybersecurity requires technical complexity. If I'm going to develop a cyber range, then I need to know how to develop it. I need to have the technical competency in order to achieve that. It's also resource intensive. I need to be able to develop and maintain a cyber range that is capable of handling a certain number of students, capable of isolating them, and capable of allowing me to monitor them and to control, essentially, access in and out. I need to keep content relevant, which means I can't just build it and forget it. This isn't simply a computer lab. These are live scenarios. I need to be able to update operating systems as we move forward. I need to be able to alter scenarios in accordance with the class's general skill level. And I need to be able to alter the content to address new attacks or new defense scenarios. I, of course, need to do this safely and ethically. I cannot allow students an opportunity, if I can avoid it, to do something that is illegal, dangerous, or unethical. That would be a failing of mine in as much as it is theirs. I need to be able to integrate this into the curriculum. I still have to teach lessons. The cyber range will not teach the students for me. It just gives me a place to let them loose to try the skills themselves. I still have to teach them this. And so I need some kind of seamless transition between the theoretical concepts that we learn about in our normal lectures to the practical hands-on stuff that they would do within their own labs. I, of course, need to make sure that I can stay on top of all of these things as well. I must have time to absorb new information, to focus on trends in the industry, to stay up to date on not only my position in the field, but also on the cyber range itself, the technology that it's using, and if there's a better way of doing it, and so on. I needed to come up with a scenario where I could adjust the skill or challenge level for certain students, because, of course, some students on certain topics will excel more than others, and we don't want them to get bored, because if they do, then they lose contact with the class, and then we have an issue where they're suddenly falling behind because we've lost their attention. We need some way to give them a harder challenge if they are up for it, which is difficult to do when you have simply a theoretical lesson or one of our current solutions, right? And lastly, scalability and accessibility. It's critically important to me that whatever solution I came up with due to funding concerns, that I would be able to essentially scale up and down with the number of students that are enrolling. We need to have a solution that can handle many students if that's the situation we're in, but one which isn't terribly expensive and time consuming to maintain if we don't. And in addition to that, online education is becoming all the more important. And several students, they may begin their career early these days prior to their graduation. So having something that would be accessible for students is important. Also, in addition to the fact that while I do teach in a technical field, I can't necessarily count on my students having access to technology, right? Technology can be expensive and students don't necessarily have a lot of money. I don't believe in certain students being at a disadvantage because they financially can't afford decent equipment. That should not be a barrier to their education. So whatever I did, it had to be essentially equally accessible to all students, regardless of their current hardware investment. And I'm happy to say that the subject of today's presentation, for me anyway, solves most of those problems. It's not going to integrate the topics into my curriculum for me, and it's not going to keep me abreast of the technologies and developments in the field. But for everything else, the solutions that I'm going to present today addressed everything else, allowing me more time for the two things that it didn't. So I'm very happy to share this with you, and what we're going to be talking about today are two scenarios. First of all, what I consider to be education-suitable cyber range platforms. Now, for me, I don't have access to this, but you will. For K through 12 only, cyber.org apparently is offering ranges. I can't speak to their quality or anything. I don't have a lot of experience with them, but from what I understand, they're available to K through 12. I believe that they are very either low or no cost, and are obviously suited for a K through 12 environment when it comes to teaching cybersecurity. For me, and for anyone else out there that might be interested in this, there are two main education-suitable cyber range platforms in my estimation: Hack the Box and Try Hack Me, and I personally am a bigger fan of Hack the Box, although that's just merely my perspective. So I'm going to spend some time talking about Hack the Box, and while I don't have specific information on cyber.org, if I tell you about Hack the Box and you check out cyber.org ranges for yourself, then at least you know what to compare it against when it comes to what the current industry leader is, at least in my estimation. And the second thing is the virtual lab that we developed here on campus. Basically is a low-cost virtual lab solution that is publicly accessible to students and essentially is capable of allowing me to teach cybersecurity courses, if necessary, in a 100% online format. So I'm going to begin with Hack the Box, and I am not paid by Hack the Box. I don't have any agreement with them. I'm not even actually their customer. I don't actually even subscribe to their paid service. So everything I'm about to tell you is simply the result of my usage of the site in a 100% free way. I love Hack the Box. Try Hack Me is great. Hack the Box is my favorite because of the following. I find that the challenges vary in complexity from very small, very quick, and very simple to some fairly complicated scenarios if I should have the need for one. The content on the site is updated regularly, which means there's less work for me to do when it comes to individual, like check your understanding type assignments. I don't need to worry about students going out and finding answer keys or write-ups online because the content updates frequently enough that I just need to do a quick search, and if I can't find it in an hour or so, then a student's probably not going to find it either, or what have you. There is a Hack the Box affiliate program, so I know that it's available to universities. We can sign up for free, and the students essentially can join, and it gives you, as the administrator of the affiliate program team, an opportunity to do a little bit extra and check up on students. Now, if you're not eligible for the affiliate program, if it is restricted only to universities, you can still take advantage of this. You just use a team instead of the affiliate program. So you just create a team, and all of your students will join the team, and it gives you more or less the same insight. I also like it because there is a ranking system and badges. It's essentially a gamified learning platform, which I know that much is made of gamified learning. I don't necessarily believe that it's everything that I have heard it to be, but I do believe that it can be useful and is at least fun. And if there is a competitive spirit amongst your students, you can, of course, arrange several teams and have them test their mettle against each other, or create teams per school and have yourself a little bit of a rivalry, a friendly, competitive rivalry, of course, nothing more than that. I also like Hack the Box because they have their own VPN system where you can very easily download a configuration file and connect to their labs. There are VMs that are built right into the platform so that students, you don't have to have a separate VM in order to have an attack platform or a learning platform. It's simply spun up on their site and you can access it through the browser, and it's wonderful. So just really quick, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But this is essentially some of the highlights as I see it on Hack the Box. So first here, this is our university's site. So this is the affiliate group that we have created. There are hundreds, possibly at this point, thousands of universities on Hack the Box. It allows our university here to essentially have students join the team, and the work that they do as part of their courses contributes essentially to a point total for the university. And ultimately, it doesn't really mean very much. It doesn't, alter anything. There's no incentive, as far as I know, to doing well. But it at least contributes to that gamified learning platform, and you do get to see how your institution performs against others. You can also, you have your social media links and so on, and you can change this to present, however you like. So there is sort of an outreach sort of aspect to it as well. It's a good way to get your name out there. Teams have a similar sort of perspective here. You can create your own team site and so on, with your own social media links and all of that. But the affiliate program here for universities is kind of a separate bucket so that just universities are together instead of having to be mixed with the teams as well as other universities. So it's more or less just a different view, I suppose, than anything else. And as the administrator of this affiliate account, I can go in and I can alter the text here or what have you as I see fit. I don't need to petition the Hack the Box to do any of this. I have direct control over all of these things. Here, for example, is a small list of the students that are on the UWSP team. At the beginning of the semester last fall when we began offensive security, So as you can see, there's my administrator account at the top. You get titles to go along with the number of points that you've accumulated. And when you first start out, if I remember correctly, you are merely a noob, but you can advance through the ranks all the way from noob to, is it elite hacker? I can't remember what the scoring system is, but yeah, so you do have a view. You can see all of the students. You can see their progress. You can see the number of systems they have owned, the users they have owned, and points they've accumulated in various different challenges. And in addition to that, you can go to their individual sites, because all practice, of course, is tracked individually as well as on the team. So here is my profile, where I can see my global ranking on the entire site, number 755 out of all of the users on the site, or all of the ranked users at least. Where the university fell when I took this screenshot, so number 90 total on the site. My personal progress towards my next rank, which is Pro Hacker. And as you can see up there at the top, there's also a tab for activities, so you can see all of the things that I've recently done, the badges I've earned, and they do have certain certificate paths as well. I haven't personally explored too much. I haven't had a need to, but they do have them, and you can earn them. I do know that. Another thing I really like about Hack the Box is the fact that it's suitable for all learners. This isn't something that would only be suitable for somebody with plenty of cybersecurity experience as it is. As you can see here is the beginner track, where you begin simply by learning how to connect to services such as FTP, SMB, Telnet, and so on, then eventually connect to a MongoDB server. Gives you a little bit of experience with certain tools that we see in cybersecurity, and also with Linux in general, which is something that even many of my students struggle with, because it's simply not common for where they come from, which is generally going to be consumer or end consumer operating systems like iOS, OS X, Windows, and so on. Android, of course, which all that's Linux, but it's not the same kind of Linux as you use when you're doing this kind of work. You don't actually need to know any commands if you're going to operate an Android device. So this gives them a path to those very simple skills to get them started. It starts out the little icon there next to meow, fawn, and dancing. That's the operating system that they'll be dealing with. So the very first challenge will put them in a Linux platform, as will the second, but the third one will be a Windows platform, so something that they might have more experience with as it is. Another thing I like about the site is that there are enough variances in the challenges that are available that indeed after they complete the beginner steps, that it's very easy to lead them on that path of breadcrumbs to slightly more difficult challenges as you go. You don't have to put yourself in the scenario where it's like, okay, I've just learned how to connect to a database. Now let's do something super difficult and, attack a target or something like that. Instead, there's essentially different paths, and each path, or there's different types of challenges, and amongst those challenges there's a myriad of different difficulties. For example, these are just the individual challenge. This is the forensic category. So I do occasionally use Hack the Box for our digital forensics class. I will use this as a way to take advantage of changing corpuses. That means that I have less to design. I can focus on just the investigations that will amount to an evaluation. Anything that is simply practice, I don't have to worry about. I can just use a Hack the Box challenge scenario. They're small, they're self-contained, and as you can see here, some of them go from very easy to quite difficult. And from my personal experience with trying these challenges, I find for myself, the more difficult challenges are just about right. So I know that if I have a student that has less experience than I do, that would be probably too much for them. So I can very easily gauge where I should be at in terms of my targeting these challenges. But these are just simply self-contained challenges. There's no virtual machine or anything. It's just going to be something that's fairly quick and easy to access, doesn't require any special tools or VPN connection or anything like that. When you are ready to move up to something slightly more difficult, then you can try the machine challenges. And here are some of those. Again, they vary in different difficulty levels. The goal of the machine challenges, rather than solving a simple challenge or a puzzle, is to obtain two flags. One which requires user access to the machine, the other which requires system access to the machine. So you can essentially attack these boxes and get on them and find the flags and submit them for points, right? In addition to that, there are other even more complex challenges for those who want a larger or more verisimilitude in their challenge. There's the Pro Labs, where essentially it is a reproduced enterprise environment with multiple machines and a network layer and so on. You can try the Tracks challenges, which is created by individual users, yes, and sometimes companies, but also other universities will essentially contribute material to the Tracks program, and they can, essentially chain together machines and challenges for either something that's particularly thematically related or perhaps just an even more faithful recreation of an enterprise environment. It really depends on the content creator and what they're going for. Fairly recently, they have added a Sherlock's type of challenge, which, as I've been explaining all of these, you probably have noticed that this seems very focused on red team skills. They are. It's the most important part, the most dangerous part of teaching cybersecurity, of course, is learning the attacks and exploits and so on. And so that's where the emphasis is, but the Sherlock challenges are more DFIR and defensive blue team security skills as it is. You can consider them puzzles, hence Sherlock's, right? So there's various different challenges here, again, ranging in complexity as they go, and it's a little bit of a different type of challenge if you want to focus on DFIR and defensive security. Now, with your team or affiliate program, one of the things I also like about it is that, of course, it tracks statistics, everything that is accomplished. It tracks what was completed, what wasn't completed, and what skills were used in each challenge, and it keeps track of that so that you can easily look at your team and see, okay, well, my students seem to be understanding the OSINT stuff pretty well, but it looks like maybe we need to dive a little bit deeper on forensics or crypto in the future weeks coming up, so that we can hit that again and give them a chance to gain better understanding of that topic, which I find to be extremely useful. One of the hardest problems that I have, maybe you can relate, but one of the biggest problems that I have as a cybersecurity educator is that it's very difficult for me to gauge where students happen to be because, number one, there's a huge variance in understanding amongst my classes, I find, but also, me personally, I already know all of the stuff I'm teaching, so it's difficult for me to tell whether or not they're getting it because, I get it. That's just me and my my informal ad hoc, I suppose, teaching coming through here. But this is helpful for me, and I'm sure likely helpful for you. And it's helpful for the student as well, because you can check individual student competency, and the student, of course, can check their own. So this is my heat map here for understanding, and I can see that for myself, it looks like maybe I need to practice a little bit more on blockchain. Actually, I've never done any blockchain challenges, that's why it's so low, but I need to focus on which skills am I lacking, at least at this point. Where is my greatest success and weaknesses here? What can I improve on? Which, of course, is very useful to have that sort of immediate, non-critical feedback, so that you can check and see how you're doing yourself. All right, so that's a lot of pros. Again, I really like Hack the Box, but it's not the end-all, be-all. No platform and no solution is. There are some problems with it. Number one, I don't think that Hack the Box offers any instruction manuals or instructor manuals at all. I don't think they do. I kind of doubt it. So if you're going to offer students a challenge, then you're going to need to know how it works and solve it yourself first, which is obviously not exactly the easiest. You are basically trading prep time Instead of creating the scenarios, you're trading that time in running through it yourself and understanding it, right? Second, there's no restriction over the social media aspect of the platform. So there's going to be other users that are in there that aren't with your institution or your school. And when the students create an account, they can interact on that site with other people. Maybe not a deal breaker for me, but it may be something for you to consider. And last, you have no control over content or use of the rating systems to ensure content is appropriate for younger learners. I have never run into any issues with this myself. None of the challenges have been even remotely inappropriate. But since I don't control the content on the site and you can't control the content on the site, again, not a deal breaker for me, but something you may want to consider. But do also remember that you can create your own custom content on Hack the Box and just use it as a platform. And in that case, you're back to prepping challenges yourself, but at least then you don't need to solve it, and you can control the content that the students are consuming. So, a little bit of a mixed bag. There's also the fact that it focuses mostly on those red team skills, but like I said, that's the most important and most dangerous part of teaching these skills anyway. Okay, next, I would like to tell you about our low-cost virtual lab. Our experience with this might be something that would be relevant to you possibly in the future, and we're awful proud of it and everything that it can do, and I believe that if anyone out there is in a position where you can do something like this also, that this is an idea that could very easily extend out to other schools and really be a major boon to cybersecurity education everywhere. So a little bit of background first. It's 2021. You may remember there was a little bit of a pandemic going on, just a touch of COVID all over the place. It also happened to be the year that we finally launched our Computer Information Systems Cybersecurity program. I had joined the department as an adjunct in 2016, and for that 5 years or so, I taught networking and cybersecurity classes as part of other programs because there was no dedicated cybersecurity program. When I decided to move into being an educator full-time, we created the cybersecurity program so that I could support it and begin that learning process. But this happened to happen during a time when we were all remote. So I had a challenge, as I mentioned before. And again, that challenge essentially was, how do I offer hands-on learning opportunities for cybersecurity learners without running afoul, of course, of ethical and legal obligations, but also I was the information security officer prior to becoming an educator full-time, and I knew intimately, therefore, what our security policies were and how was I going to work through. I didn't want to go immediately from being the information security officer to being the main security issue on campus. So how am I going to do this without running afoul of our security policies? I had some needs. If I'm going to teach cybersecurity, then I need an environment where I can give students local administrator rights. They're going to need to install and run programs that require elevated privilege levels. I don't want to give them administrative rights to the computer labs. That would be insane and has led to a lot of problems in the past, so we don't want to do that. Number two, I need to be able to control endpoint security measures. I need to be able to control access and identity management. I need to be able to control endpoint security enhancements via some measure. I need to be able to create machines, destroy machines, reset machines. I need to be able to create users. I need to be able to change passwords. I have to be able to do all of those things. Next, exemption from patch cycles, right? Some of the targets, of course, have to be vulnerable. That's what they're for. So either we live with the constant results on the vulnerability scanner saying that there's this, asset that I've stood up on the network that is intentionally vulnerable, which is not a great security decision to make. But I also can't have it a part of any collections that would push out updates to that machine, because then my scenario is destroyed because Windows decided to update at some point. So 3 needs that are directly in conflict with both the existing paradigm for security on campus or outright violates our security policies. I also had a little bit of a money problem in that I had no money at all, a $0 budget. So I knew that I was going to need some money eventually, and probably pretty soon if I was really going to make this work, but I needed a way to start it with nothing. The money that I was going to get for it, I knew was going to be sporadic. It would be based on grants, mod funds, whatever funding was available, as it came. Because in 2021, we were also in the midst of a severe budget crisis, and there was no money at the time for technology. Right? We were spending the money that we had on our existing solution to teaching technology classes, which is our computer labs. Obviously, we were spending money on those, and we didn't have any money left over for some new crazy idea that people didn't necessarily think we really needed, but also knew that we couldn't afford. I did have one thing going for me, which is that while I didn't have any money, I had two most excellent people who would help me out with making this thing a reality. So at the time, our security engineer, when I was the information security officer, who is now the information security officer himself, Sam Novak, and Logan Weston, a former CNMT CIS student, who came onto the information security team as a security analyst and still works at the department today. Could not have done it without them. And while I can't take credit for any of the actual work that went into this, I will at least take credit somewhat for the idea. And so that's what I'm going to be sharing with you mostly here today. A little bit more background. So what was our current solution? So well, not a current solution because let's say, what was our pre-pandemic solution? That was physical, non-standard computer labs. So a non-standard computer lab would be one where the students do have administrative rights that we can control, that maybe isn't connected to the campus domain, but is maybe connected to a lab domain or something so that we can create users and connect machines and so on. Something that would be literally physically isolated from the network by literally disconnecting the networking cable out of the wall and so on. Nobody thought this was a great solution. There was a history of oopsies in the labs, particularly with the networking students, accidentally plugging something into the wrong port, and well, there's an assignment, and now we have a major problem that we have to go back and fix. And this obviously wasn't going to work during the pandemic because it's an in-person resource. I can't have students come into the computer lab to do work when we have to be isolated at home. So this wasn't going to work for multiple different reasons. It's a bad idea to have a physical control for network isolation, because if you forget to unplug it or if you accidentally plug it into the wrong thing, you might have a problem. It's not great to have it so precariously set up in terms of the local domain, because the local domain means that students may have local access, and therefore we might have security issues, and it wasn't an option anyway. So this wasn't going to work for the program. The interim solution was essentially to have students install their own virtualization software, download their own ISOs, and create their own target and attack machines, essentially create an at-home security lab. But pros and cons. Okay, typically speaking, local VMs in such a fashion are great for guest-host separation, so there's a little bit less to worry about in terms of our physical computer lab or using actual hardware. But we do run into a problem where if we want to set up if we want to create an isolated lab network, quote-unquote lab network, a virtual lab network, then we need to, it's far more complicated than just, walking students through the process of creating a virtual machine is already difficult. That just adds another layer of complexity. And then we have other networking issues like, okay, well, if we allow the students a route out, then, is that going to be a problem for their internet service provider? Are they going to get in trouble? Like, for example, with services like Steam or Epic or other game management platforms, if we're teaching, certain things and they see, whatever might happen in that case, right? Essentially, we're asking them to do these things that are unsafe on their own commercial home network that they're sharing with their friends and family that they're living with, and their internet service provider, and so on and so forth. It could potentially cause legal and ethical issues, even at the best of times. Also, low portability. In this case, if a student has a hardware failure or something, that virtual machine is gone unless they were able to snapshot it and archive it somewhere. And also, I have no control over their environment whatsoever. No control and no insight, right? So I'm giving them instructions and hoping they follow them, but I have no ability to follow up, to check, to monitor, to help them in the event of technical issues. And it's just a problem. Also, their hardware, they're students. So their hardware is not always the greatest. Sometimes it's a little old. Sometimes it's a little underperforming, and so on and so forth. So we have an issue with not everyone having equal access to the same technology and same opportunities, and some people have much worse VMs than others. Next, having Windows VMs is, of course, an issue. We got around this by using the Edge developer images that Microsoft makes available, but they're only good for a limited amount of time. And after that time passes, the student has to essentially roll it back to its original state or reinstall a new VM with the same image. Because, we had volume licensing, but I'm not going to give every kid in my class the Mac key to use a Windows image that can be licensed through the university. That would be a terrible idea. Next, if we do this in person in a computer lab, we have the same problem as we did with the physical lab. It's unsuitable for COVID. It's an in-person resource. Or, conversely, we have them working on this on their own at home, in which case we're back to the same problem I had before, in that some students simply don't have access to technology at home, or they don't have access to good technology at home or suitable technology at home. So either way, we're either in person and then we're in COVID violation, or we're all at home sheltering in place, and I can't count on them having the equipment to do this thing. So I did look into some alternate solutions because, of course, this is 2021. Cloud-based solutions are here. They're out there. So I took a look at that from that perspective. Can we use Google Cloud? Can we use Azure? Can we use anything out there that might allow us to take advantage of this remotely? They work. Of course they work. There's a lot of places that are using cloud-based virtual labs, and they're not having too much of an issue at all. The problem is that my budget was $0, and these are very expensive solutions. They're ongoing non-fixed costs as well, which is a problem. The more that we use the computer lab, the more expensive it becomes. And the less we use it, the less expensive it becomes, but it's not an exponential type of growth. The more we use it, it becomes a lot more expensive. The less we use it, it only becomes a little less expensive. So that wasn't going to work. I didn't have an ongoing budget in order to do this. And of course, there's a management nightmare, because if you're going to have a cloud service, then you need an account, and then you need to have some kind of multiple people trained on the product, and essentially have the ability to move forward with any service calls and so on, or integrate it into your existing IT infrastructure. Management nightmare. Not going to happen. You need to be small. And last, while there are cloud-based virtual labs available, none of them are specifically allowed to be used for security research or security work. As a matter of fact, reading through many of the documents that they had in their terms of service and EULAs, I found many references that would be potentially problematic when it comes to doing this kind of work, because it will say specifically the things that you are and aren't allowed to do, and many of those things are the things that we learn about. So it wasn't going to work. So we settled on a last choice, a little bit of research between Sam Novak, Logan, a little bit myself, but mostly this was their show. We came up with some alternatives, some open source DIY virtual lab options. Many of the other solutions that we had, or I should say the non-open source solutions that we had, your VMware, your Hyper-V, and so on, they also priced themselves out of any solution. Right, the big enterprise virtualization technologies, too expensive for licensing, far too expensive. So we had to use open source, and we came upon 3 potential alternatives: XCP-NG, Proxmox, and Overt, and we eventually settled on Overt because it seemed to offer us everything that we were looking for: manageability, cost-effectiveness, scalability, and accessibility for students. We could make it publicly accessible. So we pushed forward with Overt in a prototype state. Now, again, I'm not going to get into the technical details here of the virtual lab because, honestly, it was not my doing. But from what I know of the product, from using it and being at least around during its development, I understand that there are several major components, and none of them are really all that special, really. The overt engine, which is the basis for essentially the user interactability and management portion of the virtual lab, runs off of Java with PostgreSQL. It uses GWT for the front end. It gives us access to a user portal and an admin portal. Clients can connect directly to the user portal to sign in. You can have direct access to the backend VMs through Spice, although we disable that. Those sit on nodes. They interact through XML RPC through a daemon running on the nodes, which is Python. And then we just integrate it into, so I should say we are able to integrate it into our existing security infrastructure, existing security, perimeter security devices by simply using our WAF and AD for authentication, which is norm for our institution. And for the networking layer, the lab didn't end up looking like this. This is just my back of the napkin sketch that I did at the outset of this thing. The networking for segmentation and isolation, we are able to use pfSense, which is a virtualized networking infrastructure, a virtual switch. We can connect the host directly to that, and the virtual switch will handle all of the VLAN assignments for a server range, which essentially workstations can access servers. And I'll use servers for storing instructional materials. Like if we're going to be in digital forensics, we're going to be examining specific evidence. I can put the evidence up on a server that all of the workstations have access to, and everyone can go there and grab it. We don't have to host it on our LMS or anything like that. They can just grab it right directly from somewhere within the local network. The workstations themselves can sit in their own VLAN, and then I can have the vulnerable targets, anything that I create that could potentially be dangerous if exposed to the public. I have that in its own separate vulnerable VLAN that can only be accessed through the workstations. And as for the identity and access management, how am I going to keep this secure? How am I going to keep students from doing things to other students accidentally or intentionally? How am I going to keep members of the general public from getting in, and so on and so forth? We have several defensive layers here as far as identity and access management goes. We, of course, have our WAF that does interception over the portal. It uses ADFS for authentication, and we use MFA at that point as well. So that gets them onto the engine, essentially through the user portal. After that, in order to be authenticated past the user portal, they have to be members of an AD group. In our case, I have the ability to edit those groups and add or subtract students to them, as necessary. But if that is not something that your IT team would specifically allow, then they would have to handle that. But at this point, that would be the end of the work that they would need to do, because once you have access as an administrator to the virtual lab, then you can grant roles within Overt, which gives them access to the individual machines that you choose to give them access to and the level of access that they will have. And then finally, on the virtual machines themselves, of course, those will have local credentials or lab domain credentials if you choose. So students will need to still sign in with a username and password in order to get in. That is, of course, if you require them to do so, because you can just have a model login. And if you choose to configure those. Me, I actually choose not to. I do have a user and password set up, but I will use the same user and password for all of the VMs. So members of the general public may not be aware of it, I suppose, but all of the students in the class will know the username and password. It's the same one for all of the virtual machines. That's just my specific choice, because as I see it, these other three layers are plenty effective at preventing other students from logging on to machines that aren't theirs, whereas just simply having local lab domain credentials is sufficient for anyone else that may somehow manage to make it through. So here's just a timeline here of how things ended up for us, right? So in 2020, when the prototype was developed, this was the year before we launched our cybersecurity program, but we knew that we needed something like this, even if it was just to teach sporadic cybersecurity courses, because we were limited in the topics that we could cover and the way we could cover them with the existing infrastructure. So that's when we built the prototype out of decommissioned former IDS and util servers. Sam was the lead on this one, and he tells me it took him about 18 hours. And then once that was done, it was 2 hours for me to set up a few virtual machines for the class that I was running in fall 2020 and provision the 8 or so students that were in the class that semester. 2021, we officially launched our cybersecurity program, and that summer we made based on the performance of the prototype up to that point, which had been extremely successful, but of course was limited by the hardware we had available. We made our first investment in the lab to officially launch it. We spent $20K, and I'm a little bit upset, if I'm truth be told, because that $20K, we had 2 quotes. I got a quote in 2020 to see what our hardware investment would be like, and then it sat too long, and we had to refresh the quote the next year in 2021. And in addition to the pandemic, you may recall that there was some supply chain issues between 2020 and 2021. So our quote in 2020 was for the 20K, basically twice the machine that we ended up having to get in 2021. Like literally, we could, the same amount of money, we'd only get half as much equipment as it got us a year before that. It was heartbreaking, but we had to pull the trigger if we wanted to have a lab to use. So we ended up biting the bullet and going forward with it. So we purchased hardware, not as much as we would have liked, but it was enough to get us going. We expected the lifespan of that to be about 7 years before we have to make another investment to either replace hardware or upgrade, depending on the direction that we were going in. But also keep in mind that this is a virtual lab, so obsolescence won't be instant, right? The machines are virtual. I started out running Windows 7 on the machines. By the time, a year had passed, we were on Windows 10. The versions of the target machines I was running were upgraded. So it means that if you need to devote more of the virtual resources to your guests, you simply are able to run less of them. So you can still use the lab, you just might not be able to use it to its previous capacity. Then in 2023, we had some moderate upgrades, right? So we spent another $6.5K to expand the storage capacity, because that was the major bottleneck in the lab up to that point, is the fact that we just didn't have enough space for that many virtual machines. But now, with what we currently have, we're doing pretty darn good. So for 27K, we have a virtual lab that hosts currently 113 VMs for 80 students. That's every student in our cybersecurity program and then a few more at about 66% utilization. So I estimate we could get as many as about 170 VMs, as long as they are, using the same basic templates that we're using, and we don't have any sudden resource allocation issues or any target or virtual machines or anything that require additional resources beyond what the typical is for our current state. I am investing about 10 hours over a 16-week semester for administration. That's creating machines, destroying machines, provisioning users, assigning permissions, and so on. That also includes assisting students with support issues. I'm their first contact for support in the virtual lab. So if their machine breaks or they forget their login or something like that, then they'll call me and I'll deal with it. And I'm spending about 10 hours. About half an hour a week or so, give or take. It does still require an ongoing time investment from Sam. That's about 5 hours a year, give or take, for patching. So in the winter and summer, or just in the summer or just in the winter, depending on where we're at, that's when major patches are due. There's minor patching in between, but major patches are essentially biannually. And for that, we got a lab that is publicly accessible, completely isolated, easily reset, events all logs, has a web-based console, and is further upgradable, allowing us to do essentially almost everything we could possibly want to do in those classes. Also, we have some peace of mind. If or when we need to offer classes fully online again, we are ready. If or when we decided to offer a 100% online degree program, we are ready. And there's still more that we could be doing with it that I'm not. So I admit I'm not an overt expert, and I'm still learning as I go. I'm still, for example, figuring out GPU utilization. Right now I'm teaching a game hacking course, and we're not using the IA lab because I don't know how to do GPU virtualization, or if we can do GPU virtualization with our current setup. I don't know if I might need to make another hardware investment. I haven't looked into it. And also importing packaged VMs. So many of the tools that we use in cybersecurity right now are moving away from ISOs to prepackaged VMs, and importing those is a little bit more of a complicated process than I would like. So there's pros and cons to this too. Of course, pros, complete control over the scenarios. It's extremely versatile. It's much better for blue team instruction than the online platforms like Hack the Box, which mostly focus on red team. Your rules, your content, your playground, you can monitor, and measure to your heart's content. The cons, of course, is that there is administrative overhead. You are going to have to act as IT support, although you might already do that at your school. And you need to invest time in configuring and creating scenarios because there's no prepackaged content like there is on Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. There's no scenarios already set up for you. SecGen is a product that can help with this. It's used to generate targets for CTFs, so you can look into that, and that might help you out there. But yeah, you still have to put in the legwork. So just to give you an idea of how I'm currently using this just in my classes. So each student is issued their own Kali Linux VM in the IA lab, essentially when they take their foundational cybersecurity courses. It will be the VM that they use in the IA lab throughout their entire academic career. For simple assignments that are either ungraded as part of class walkthroughs or are part of modest, like check your understanding kind of things, mostly for the instruction portion, I'll use well-known and tested targets, right? So Metasploitable, Bbox, JuiceShop, WebGoat, DVWA, so on and so forth, all of those. You can't really use them as an assignment because there's just too many walkthroughs out there. Everybody knows the solutions to these challenges. So I will use them for instruction. You know, we're going to talk about cross-site request forgery. Go to DVWA, and we're going to follow these instructions, and we're going to see how this works. I'm going to explain it as we go, something like that. When it's time for your check your understanding or something that might be evaluated but not a full assignment or something like that, then I'll use Hack the Box. It's easy. They can sign into it from their virtual machine in the IA lab so that they can get used to using it and so on. They can take care of those challenges. And there's no solution manual available. It's difficult to find a solution. So they have to solve it. There's no walkthroughs available. For their true evaluations, their lab assignments or their final projects and so on, then I will use prepared controlled scenarios in the IA lab that I have created. They are custom for the class. There are definitely no solutions out there. The only one who knows how to solve them is me, and whether I wrote it down or not depends entirely on how with it I was that semester. And so that's my method for utilization. How and where do I use it? I currently use it in 5 of the 8 cybersecurity courses we have in the CIS Cybersecurity Core. So the courses that are just for majors in the cybersecurity option. I use it for Intro to Information Assurance. That's where they get their student VM. We spend some time learning Linux, and we will use it as we go through each topic in the course. So when we get to encryption, when we get to buffer overflows and all of that kind of stuff, they're using their virtual machine in class. I used it for application security, where they use it for reverse engineering, dynamic analysis, payload creation. Their evaluations are on applications running on a target server using XINetD in the vulnerable VLAN. I use it for enterprise security so that we can simulate a Windows domain with Linux servers, Windows endpoints. They can use security onions, Selks firewall. They can use group policy. And I, in that case, get to be the user and attacker. And the user gets to be assumed to be the worst case scenario, which is just wonderful. I use it for digital forensics because the most painful part of teaching forensics is when you have large corpus that requires students to spend a couple of hours downloading it and then a couple of hours doing intake in their favorite tool and so on. Well, with digital forensics, I can create a lab VM with all of the tools prepackaged. I can put the evidence on it, or I can host it centrally, and then it's just that much faster, right? I can deploy, for example, Autopsy, the open source forensic suite, in multi-user mode and just point it at an evidence repository and even pre-create the cases for them, and the ingest is done. They can hit their ground running. And of course, offensive security. Obviously, we're going to use it there. That's one of the main use cases for it. Just a couple of screenshots here. This is my machine here in the virtual lab. You can see that this is running in an incognito window in Chrome, although we have tested it with Firefox and Edge, Brave and Opera, and it all seems to work fine. I haven't had any issues. This is just my Kali Linux VM. It's got all kinds of things running, and all of the built-in tools are already there. This is me using that machine to access a target in the vulnerable VLAN. So here at 20.34, I have BWAP installed. That's Broken Web App, or BBox. This is just me accessing the PDF on the remote server to show that I can connect to it, and it's working. This is Firefox running within Chrome, right? So you can see that I'm using Firefox in my VM, but I'm using Chrome on my host machine. And here's me on that VM connecting to the server for application security, where I can just connect via netcat. XINetD will serve up the application, and the student will need to exploit the applications that come up. I give them a copy of the binary so they can reverse engineer it, and they have to develop their own payload. And that is it. I am definitely out of time. So if you want my corpus, or you want to talk shop, if you have any questions on the iLab administration or anything like that, feel free to contact me anytime. I am always more than happy to talk to anyone and spread these ideas and help to improve cybersecurity education for all students, not just my own. But if you have technical questions on the iLab, please contact Sam Novak, our information security officer / genius, who made all of this possible and continues to do so because he's the one who's really smart about this stuff. Thank you very much, and goodbye.